Welcome back, everybody, to the Always Bayern Chelsea show. Today is Wednesday, August 7th, and so we're here to give you some updates now that the preseason is officially underway, and maybe we have a little bit more clarity when it comes to transfers for both Bayern and Chelsea, although, honestly, not a whole lot has happened in that department.
Yeah, preseason's basically over at this point. Lots of things going on with teams flying back and forth from other countries, whether it's the U.S., Asia, headed back to the mainland in most cases, and Fabrizio's still doing his job. It's still the transfer window, so lots to discuss.
Bayern still has one more preseason match against Spurs again this coming Saturday, although Bundesliga season starts at the end of the month, whereas Premier League starts, the 16th or 15th or whatever, one of those days?
Yeah, it's coming up quick. I mean, it'll be basically tomorrow, it seems like. It's crazy.
Yeah, so do you want to jump into some preseason action right away and just kind of dial it back and talk about, at least for Bayern, they've had 3 preseason matches. I think, Chelsea's had 4?
Chelsea's had 5. Yeah, we can talk. Let's talk some. Should we talk Bayern first?
Yeah, let's talk Bayern first. So Bayern's first official preseason match was kind of a while back now, when they didn't really have hardly any of their first team players. I don't honestly have any idea how to pronounce this team, but let's just say there was an amateur small town team that Bayern kind of plays as like a favor for hosting this little training camp that they do down there. And Bayern won 14-1. They play this team every year. Usually it's 20-0, etc., etc. So that was the first one.
You're making it sound like they played the German school of the blind and deaf. I mean, it's crazy. This guy's not giving the team any credit. I mean, to score a goal against a top Bundesliga team, I would argue, is a very impressive feat.
It was impressive, and I'm honestly not going to lie either. The other team's goalie for the first 20 minutes was outstanding. Bayern had just tons and tons of shots, as you'd expect, and he was just grinding and working. So hopefully that guy moves up in this world, because man, that was a good performance. But yeah, Bayern had their C or D team, I would say, playing this one. Although I do have to give a shout out to Mathys Tel, who had a hat trick, and he was my man of the match. He was really one of the main regular players who really played in that one and did great.
Seeing lots of chatter lately on the timeline about Tel. People expecting him to have a big breakout season. I know you've been a fan of him, promoting his name out there in the world on this podcast. So would say you're slightly ahead of the curve on that. So well done by you, but excited to see what he brings this year.
Yeah, I am too, and we'll kind of get into this, but right now Bayern does have a log jam at that kind of winger attacking position, and I hope that Tel gets a lot of minutes, because if he does, I could honestly see a 20-ish goal season incoming for him. He looked great in the rest of their preseason matches as well.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing, is everybody saying they want him to get 20 goals. Maybe a tough target to get to. You could say 20 goal contributions would be a more realistic target. I don't know, depends how you look at things, but I know they've always had that log jam, and there's still time in the window, so maybe they'll make some more moves. We'll see what happens, I guess, with that, but sounds like Bayern has had kind of a ho-hum preseason, if you will, in terms of kind of going through the motions, and nothing crazy's happening, right, in terms of crazy injuries or huge errors or anything.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's always excitement at FC Hollywood, but I guess speaking of that, we'll kind of move into the second match here, because Bayern kind of came back down to earth with their second preseason match against FC Düren, who's I believe 4th division team in Germany. And while Bayern definitely didn't have most of their good players yet back for that one either, they were kind of, I would say, running out a B or a C team for that one. And honestly, that level team from Bayern Munich should still be able to beat this team, and they drew 1-1. unfortunately, early on in the match, Hiroki Ito did get injured. That's been their really only injury this preseason so far, but he broke his foot and he'll be out probably a couple months, which sucks because they just signed him and he was going to be kind of sliding in that versatile left center back position, and really I think could have helped Company maybe figure out what kind of formation he wants to run or whatever. So that was a bummer. Feel bad for him.
That's right. I do remember seeing that one, so maybe I misspoke. There was one injury, but still overall, I would say that's decent compared to some other teams that I've seen out there in preseasons. You never know what can happen.
Yeah, so in that match, the only goal that Duren had was just a bad mistake from Stanisic. He just passed it right to Duren, pretty much right in front of the goal, and Sven Ulrich had no really chance at saving it. So that was unfortunate, but I guess the bright spot in that game, and honestly, throughout all of preseason so far, Bayern has a youngster from Australia that we haven't really heard much of or seen much of before this season. But yeah, he's 18 years old. Irankunda, I think is how you say his name, but he scored a goal in that match against Duren, and he also scored at least one in the 14-1 victory, and then just has looked really good all preseason. He could potentially be that backup striker to Kane. I mean, Tell can also be a striker, and they have a couple other guys who could maybe do that sort of a role, but it was cool to see a youngster really shine, and I'm excited for his future.
You say he's 18 years old. I mean, I look at a guy like that. Chelsea has some similar guys. You want them to do well. They're doing well in preseason a lot of times. You never know. Bayern could still send them out on loan. Some of those guys they just will never trust, even if they show the ability at that age. It can be tough sometimes, but I'd love to see a young guy like that on Bayern learning from Harry Kane. That'd be awesome.
Totally. And the only other thing I want to mention about that match is that one really looked bad by Vincent Kompany. Just the lineups he was doing, the formations he was doing. Dyer was playing in the midfield to start the match. It was just, he didn't have the top guys for sure, but it kind of looked like he was really, still figuring things out and didn't know what he was doing at all in that one. But it's not all negative, because I thought he was awesome in their final, at this point, their third preseason match.
Yeah, and this is where it can be really tough, because preseason, some people believe it matters a lot. Some people will tell you it literally means nothing. By the definition of what the games are, they do mean nothing. You're playing a game probably not at 100%. A lot of times not even at 80% from what I've seen watching some of these preseason games. Can't necessarily count on Bayern's ability and how hard they were trying. But some of these games, as the manager, you throw things out there just to see if something sticks. Maybe you throw a Dyer in midfield just to then say, okay, now I know that I'm never going to do that again. And that's a legitimate thing to do, because you never know. Maybe you get 3 guys in a row that are hurt in your midfield. Who am I going to bring in then? I'll bring in Dyer. And now he knows what would happen if you had brought in Dyer in that scenario.
Totally. I definitely agree with that. But like I said, I thought the next preseason match in Seoul, South Korea versus Tottenham was truly electric and fun. I think those are the best 2 words to describe it. And it was definitely a hot night in Korea, and the pitch conditions weren't ideal from what I was reading. However, you could really start to see, hopefully, what Vincent Kompany wants to do with Bayern Munich in that match. He had a lot more of the players back. The German international players were back for that one. Still missing Kane, was still missing Upamecano, Coman, De Ligt. So there was a handful of guys who weren't back yet for that one. But we really saw the kind of high-pressing, fast-paced, tons of passes style of football that companies talked about wanting to play. And the style that really does work well with the players that Bayern Munich has.
That's certainly great to hear that he's putting his stamp on the team. Always great. As I said, preseason can be tough to tell sometimes, but you want to see the team moving in the correct direction. If they're clearly getting worse every game, that would still be a bad sign, albeit being the preseason. So that's definitely good to hear that Kompany's starting to get his tactics through to the players, and they're listening to him and doing some of the things that he wants them to do.
Yeah, and the other good thing, too, to mention that I kind of saw during that match was it really looked like the players knew where they were supposed to be and where they were supposed to kind of go with the ball when they got it. And, you know, it's so hard to judge this type of thing in preseason and also just from watching practices, but it does look like Kompany is very involved in the practices, and he kind of has a stronger personality, and it seems like he has a clear idea of what he wants to do. From the clips that I've seen, he really just gets in there in front of the players and kind of like tells them exactly what he wants them to do. And I mean, we saw that in the match. I mean, 4 minutes in, Serge Gnabry comes rushing through and steals the ball from Spurs in the box, and then his shot is saved, but then Vidovic scored right after off the rebound. So to start off the match like that, you could really tell that Spurs, you know, lowly Spurs, had really no answer for Bayern's press.
You said it right there. I was going to say it. No surprise that Bayern would slice and dice right through a Spurs team. Let's be honest, a very poor team out of London in Spurs. No matter where they finish in the standings, I'll always believe that they're very inferior to Chelsea and the other London teams. So great to hear that Bayern was looking great against them, and hopefully they can smash them again and make them have zero confidence for the entire season.
Exactly. Yeah, so the other few things I want to mention about that match just before we kind of wrap up Bayern's preseason up until this point. Goretzka scored in the 56th minute, which was really nice to see. There's a lot of people that want to sell him. The club clearly wants to sell him. Eberl and the new regime at Bayern really doesn't see a role for him by all reports. But honestly, I think that our midfield right now is as solid as it's going to be and as solid as I'd like it to be. That was one of my notes from the match. I thought Kimmich played well in the midfield, Goretzka, Leimer, and then Paulinho and Pavlovic. Like, I want to keep all those guys. There's a chance that Kimmich and Goretzka will get sold, but I really want to keep them all. And kind of like you mentioned, you know, a couple guys get injured. You play so many matches during the season. You're going to have to rotate. Like, I want to keep that amount of guys and have them fight for their spots.
Yeah, always important to have a deep squad. I think Bayern usually has a fairly deep squad. I know last year they had many injuries at times, but they were still able to kind of get through the season, even though they didn't finish as high as they wanted to, but they had to get through Champions League games. So, yeah, you just want to have guys that can play. You know, they're bringing a few guys in that'll be key. Obviously, they're bringing in Elise, which will be so electric, and he'll have a lot of the load. But these guys that will be behind him and next to him will be just as important for the team.
Yeah, and that's one name that I haven't even talked about yet because he hasn't been with the team. He's been Michael Elise, I guess I should say, has been lighting it up in the Olympics. It seems like every single match he's had either a goal or an assist or both, honestly. So I'm excited to see what he'll do with this group. But yeah, I was real happy with that Spurs match. I think my man of the match was Gnabry for that one, and like I said, Tell has been performing highly as well. Honestly, Bayern could have scored 5 or 6 goals that match. It was, you know, that's how much pressure they were putting on.
And if they had Harry Kane, they probably would have scored 3 less. So.
But no, I am excited to see how Kane fits in with this group of attackers, and I hope, honestly, I know he doesn't like to do this, he's a team player, but I kind of hope he has more of a poacher role this year and just kind of sits in the box, because with these types of attackers and this many attackers on the team, you know, I could see him scoring 40 goals.
Agree 1,000% with your poacher take. With Elise on that wing, he's going to score a lot in that type of role. I also do want to see from Kane, just rest a little bit. You're getting up there in age. We saw last year, injured toward the end. Did that hurt him? Maybe so. Did it hurt England? Probably so. I just think he needs to load manage, as they say in the NBA. It's okay to do. You're at a big club. They got guys to replace you. They got enough players that can play well. You can take games off against scrub-a-dub in the tub, some stupid Bundesliga team, you know? So
100%.
just be careful if you're Harry Kane, in my opinion.
Kane and Sané, I want them to rest. Those are two guys who, for some reason, play 90 minutes almost every match. And Sané, like you said with Kane, definitely to the detriment of the German national team and probably to Bayern Munich at the end of last season as well. But why don't we kind of focus on Chelsea and talk about the boys under Enzo Maresca so far?
Yeah, 5 preseason games, as I said, in the United States of America. And it's been tumultuous, to say the least. Lots happening, lots of news, lots of players getting time, new positions being played, tactics being learned. Not to mention, we said this in the last pod, a little preview of it. I was in Santa Clara at the first preseason match against Wrexham, which ended in a 2-2 draw. And I got to say, it's not worth it seeing a preseason game of your team unless you've never seen them in any capacity. For a guy like you who has not seen Bayern live, if they ever come to the States, even if they're playing a high school team and they're just watching from the sidelines, I would go if I were you.
Maybe they'll come to Lambeau again.
They might. They probably will eventually come to the United States. But if you've already seen your team play, it's kind of a letdown from what the actual product is. Preseason, especially that first match, it looks like they're going in slow motion compared to what 100% is. It's great to see the players, pre-game warm-ups. The match was a complete letdown. It's just not as exciting as a real game. So I'm glad my trip wasn't just for that game because I would have been disappointed. But yeah, it's been an interesting preseason to say the least. Chelsea has been 1 win, 1 draw, 3 losses. I'll kind of go into some more detail here about what I think, but have you caught any of the action or no?
No, I've watched the highlights, I think, from every Chelsea match so far. But yeah, I haven't watched any full matches live. I mean, with the pitch conditions in the United States, how could I?
Yeah, it's tough, and Enzo Maresca's been commenting, Pep's been commenting. There's always these things people say about the pitch conditions in the U.S. here. It's all true, unfortunately. I wish they could all play at Lambeau Field. High-quality grass up there, even by UEFA standards, I think. So it's tough when that happens. I think even last night against Real Madrid, you could tell they weren't going 100%. Real Madrid's first goal kind of snuck past the keeper. Badiashile, in a real game, slides to keep it out of the goal. Didn't even try at all last night. And it looks pathetic in the moment. But if you can take a step back as a fan, calm yourself down, and understand the reality of the situation, you'll realize that this is just all part of the preseason.
I agree with that. And I also think that, while Bayern and Chelsea both have new coaches who are implementing new systems, I think a team like Chelsea is just going to take a little bit longer to kind of figure out this new system with Maresca. I think you have to give him a little bit more time, just because the players are so young and the system is considerably different, at least compared to Bayern Munich, where company is coming in and he's implementing a system that a lot of these players, Kimmich, Goretzka, Gnabry, Coman, these guys used this sort of a system under Flick and kind of sort of under Nagelsmann. So at least for Bayern, that last match against Spurs, it looked like they knew what they were doing and they had used a system like that before. Whereas Chelsea, I feel like you got to give them more time. The team has to get back together in its entirety and kind of things have to start rolling from there.
Yeah, so many factors are going into this. You have young players, you have players coming in and out, players from tournaments such as the Euro that aren't even going to join until they get back to Cobham. You got a new coach with new tactics, and you went against some really top teams that were in top form because they had already gotten their legs under them with multiple games. Wrexham, it was their second or third preseason game. Celtic, it was their final preseason game. They were playing a real game the next week. City had played a few games already. Real Madrid, that was their last game. So I think there's a lot of reasons that you could say Chelsea, whether it was they weren't as fitted as the other team or just still learning the tactics, there's a lot of real excuses. And I'm not one to make excuses normally, but in preseason, you can do these types of things. I've watched enough NFL or MLB spring training to know how these things work. It's pretty similar in that sense. But I still think there's been some bright spots. I will say there's certain players, certain things tactically I've seen where Chelsea has improved, which has been great. But yeah, it's just tough when you have all those things coming together.
Yeah, definitely. I guess not to just sound totally negative after you just put out a beautiful depiction of some bright spots, but there are definitely some bad mistakes that can't happen. They're a young team in a new system, like we said. You can't have some of these bad mistakes. I'm talking defensive lapses, passes in front of the goal to the other team. And honestly, the thing that would worry me most, I think, about Chelsea, I mentioned this to you the other day, but I might as well say it here too, is potentially a younger team not grasping Enzo's system, and then Enzo potentially being stubborn about it and not wanting to change. I'm not saying that's Enzo, in a nutshell. I'm just saying I know that there are coaches that do that.
The good part about the mistakes is they're individual player mistakes. They're not due to the system and a lack of understanding of the system from what I've seen, and I've pretty much watched every minute that they've played thus far. The mistakes they're making, and on a faster pitch, some of these wouldn't even happen, but they're bad passes where they're deep in their own half, trying to go back to the keeper or to another center back or defender. They're just mistakes. They will happen from time to time, certainly. I wouldn't be surprised if some did happen in the regular season, but they're easier to correct than, say, a mistake where teammates don't understand the positions they're supposed to be in, the tactical angles that Maresca maybe wants the ball to be played. There's been a lot of improvement as well, as I mentioned, over these matches. The first couple, it really was a mess with combo of these mistakes and the system looking iffy. Offensively, they've really moved the ball incredibly well at some points. That's been impressive to watch. Building from the back, and they've taken the ball right down the field in the blink of an eye in some instances. Whether they score or not, I'm not that concerned because it's great to see them linking up across the middle of the field, down the wings, whatever the case may be. A lot of times starting with the goalie, so that's been awesome. And as I talk about that, I do have to mention a few bright spots. There's a few players that have been incredible. Number one being Romeo Lavia, which is phenomenal to see. This is a guy that missed essentially all of last season. We probably didn't even talk about him much last year, but they had purchased him from Southampton, for $45 million, I want to say. He was maybe going to go to Liverpool, chose Chelsea, and then gets hurt and essentially doesn't play. It's kind of like bringing him in this window. Chelsea's had a bit of a quieter window, some fans would say. Bringing a guy like that is amazing. He's probably going to start at the beginning of this year. He's played basically every minute of the preseason, so he's been huge. And not to mention a guy like Christopher Nkunku as well, who is also essentially a new player that missed most of last season. He's been awesome too. So that's super key for Chelsea.
I think the other thing too, as you talk about this, I'm imagining in this system, in this Enzo Maresca system, Marc Cucurella, on the left side, inverting, and even maybe in a little bit of a different lineup, Reece James inverting as well. So I think that that's very exciting. I've always said and always thought that Chelsea's attack is very exciting. I guess I'd like to see their center backs stay healthy and then provide some more stability than we saw last season. But there are some key things to look forward to, because we haven't even mentioned Cole Palmer.
Yeah, there's a lot of key positions that we'll notice right away against Man City on the 18th, what Enzo wants to do with his lineup. Obviously, they're missing guys like Palmer, Cucurella, as you said. That left-back spot has been interesting. He's admitted, Enzo, that he really doesn't like Chilwell in the inverted left-back. He's basically gotten 0 minutes. They've experimented with primarily Malo Gusto at the left-back. He's been interesting when he inverts in that spot. And then you have Reece James at the right-back, kind of playing a more traditional right-back spot, not inverting into the midfield. When Gusto's in that midfield spot, it makes him less of a left-back because he's inverting. Defensively, when you don't have the ball, you're back at the left-back spot. That's kind of how the tactics work. So it's been tougher for him to get back and defend one-on-one that way because he's not used to it. But when he's in the midfield, he's shown a lot of ability, which is interesting. And when he goes back to right back eventually, he'll probably have to start the season at right back because we know Reece is out for at least those 3 games with the red card. But that's a spot to look at for sure. Who's going to start the year at left back? Will Cucurella be back? I doubt it for 90 minutes. But are they going to play Chilwell? I doubt that. Maybe Colwell would be my guess at left back. And then you invert Gusto at the right back spot. That would be just my educated guess. But as I mentioned, with company, trying and experimenting things, that's what Enzo has done a lot. He threw Mudryk on the right wing the other night. We all knew that wasn't going to work. It didn't work. And then after the match, he was like, yeah, we wanted to just see what would happen. He's better on the left wing.
All this talk about inversion and things like that, it just got me thinking about, as you were describing what these players on Chelsea are doing or trying to do in the preseason, it got me thinking about what Tuchel did with all the injuries that Bayern had in the Champions League against Arsenal and Madrid. And honestly, part of this too is because Alphonso Davies was defending so poorly, but then playing so well as a winger. He would basically completely switch roles. Like, for example, Davies would actually play as a winger even though he was left back. And then you had guys like Gnabry who are running all the way down the pitch and defending like a right back at times, and Rafael Guerrero playing every single position on the left side under the sun. And I don't know exactly what Enzo's plans are, but there's certainly some room to experiment, like you said, like we're getting at, and I think it's going to be fun to see what these guys do.
Yeah, there was one game where Gusto was almost playing like a left wing back position, getting super far up, which you may never see throughout the regular season. Who knows, There's been a lot of spots where you can experiment. A couple other bright spots, I think Marc Guiu, the young striker out of Barcelona that we got for $6 million, has been a bright spot, and he might still go out on loan, similar to that guy in Bayern who's so young, but he's been a bright spot. Noni Madueke on the right wing scored a few goals, got a nice assist the other day over to Raheem Sterling, been a bright spot, although still inconsistent. The wing spots will be very interesting to watch going forward here. Wouldn't shock me if Chelsea purchase a winger at the last minute. The left wing just doesn't look strong, Sterling and Mudryk. I hate to trash Mudryk. I will never really trash him because I love him so much, but just so inconsistent. Sterling as well. He scores this brilliant goal the other night, and then against Real Madrid, just dribbles into the guys every time he has the ball and just looks terrible and washed up.
I could never trash Sterling just because the very first, or I shouldn't say the very first, one of the first Chelsea matches I watched in a public setting was against Man City, and Sterling was the saving grace, and everybody was going crazy. And it was just such a good time. He gave me so much joy.
Great goal against Man City. Would argue that was just such a beautiful pass by Nico Jackson to Sterling, so I'll give more credit to Nico. But, Sterling, I would argue, is going to start the year on the left wing just because he kind of knows that type of system and how to play as a winger like that, where Mudryk hopefully can still develop at some point. I don't know. There's a lot of spots that will be interesting to watch. Where do you put in Nkunku? Where do you put this new guy that they just bought that we'll talk about in a few minutes here? Where do you put Palmer? Where do you put Dewsbury Hall? Where do you even put some of these midfielders that can be attacking, like an Enzo, a Lavia? And let's not forget about a Caicedo. There's so many things Enzo could do, and I think the preseason just really didn't show completely what he's thinking in that beautiful mind of his, that beautiful bald-headed mind that he looks nothing like Pep. You could never possibly compare him to Pep. He's so much more attractive than Pep.
The Baldies are taking over the Premier League. That's for sure. And if you need a left winger or just a winger in general, Bayern certainly has plenty that they're looking to get rid of. So we can talk.
We'll take them all.
All right. Do you want to talk a little bit about transfers now? There hasn't been a ton of updates, but I have updates on the rumors and everything.
I would love to hear about all the rumors that Bayern has right now. I haven't seen a Fabrizio Bayern tweet in years.
Okay, well, I got everything up in the noggin, so we'll go through this because, to be honest with you, Bayern Munich has a laundry list of players that they're trying to sell, very unsuccessfully at this point. So let's just kind of go through some of them and just talk about what's going on right now, what's likely going to happen with them, and honestly, things could be different tomorrow. Like the way that this works, stuff happens so fast, and maybe by the time I even get around to posting this, something will be completely different and I'll sound like a total idiot. But yeah, here we go. So same as last time, the people that Bayern brought in, Hiroki Ito from Stuttgart, as we mentioned, broke his foot. He'll be out for a while. Sucks pretty bad. Feel bad for the guy. Michael Olise, killing it in the Olympics right now. Excited to see him, especially excited to see him link up with Kane and some of the other attackers. And then João Palhinha, who is a defensive midfielder, really a destroyer type, the kind that Bayern has needed and craved for years. Tuchel was on his knees begging for him, and unfortunately it couldn't go through, but he looked pretty solid against Spurs. That was his first preseason match, and he came in and immediately got a yellow card, so he's kind of doing that tackling, big boss defensive midfielder role. And I'm excited for him, honestly. I'm really excited. A product of Fulham.
Yeah, a feisty type of player. Certainly have zero respect for him coming from Fulham, but I understand the need of Bayern and why they'd want a player like him.
Yeah, so now I'm going to go through the list of players that Bayern supposedly wants to sell and kind of go through them and see where they're at. So from the winger perspective, it's been rumored forever that Coman and Gnabry, that Bayern wants to sell them. And there's been some rumors about Sané as well. I think currently it's looking like Sané is going to stay and extend his contract. I know he wants to stay. I think Bayern's going to give him an extension, but there have been some rumors about Arsenal with him. I don't think those are very true, just that Arsenal would like to have him. And then Gnabry, I think, is also going to end up staying just because I don't know who would buy him. Newcastle has some interest in him, but honestly, he's got an injury history, and he really wants to stay in Bayern and really wants to prove himself under Kompany. And he's looked like one of our better players this preseason so far, so I'm just going to say I hope he stays. And then when it comes to Kingsley Coman, it's looking like he's likely going to be sold or at least loaned out. PSG has significant interest in him. And as much as I like the guy and I would love for him to stay, there's just a logjam at that position, and it might be just the right time for him to move on. So we'll see what happens with him. And then, more wingers for Bayern. Brian Zaragoza from Spain, who never really got a chance under Thomas Tuchel and honestly has looked pretty bad every time I've seen him play. He'll most likely be loaned back to Spain, it was just a poor move by Bayern to get him. They didn't need him, kind of overpaid for him when they had all those injuries last year in a little bit of a panic in the winter transfer window. But, and I guess I should, I feel bad for the guy. It's not that he's looked horrible. He just looks like every minute he gets, he's trying so desperately to prove himself. He's running offside. He's shooting when he should pass. Just he needs some time to develop.
Some players need to change the scenery too. We've probably discussed this in the past, but you go to a new club and you just can turn the page and not look back at where you were, and that helps a lot of guys, especially young guys.
Yeah, so then we have this, I guess, now trio of youngsters who have looked good in preseason, but it's preseason, so who knows what will happen. I'm guessing at least one or two of these guys will be loaned or honestly maybe go down to the younger teams, but you have Irankunda, who I talked about, Ibrahimovic, and Vidovic. All three of these guys are like 18, 19 years old, and they're all attackers, so I don't see how they're going to get any minutes this season, but, who knows? Could be a ton of injuries. And then moving on to the midfield, kind of already mentioned Kimmich and Goretzka, and it sounds like Goretzka wants to stay. It sounds like he wants to fight for his role again real badly. Good for him. I hope he does. I like him a lot more than most people do. Great box-to-box midfielder, if you ask me. And then when it comes to Kimmich, the last couple days, it's sounding like there's a better chance he's going to stay and extend his contract. I think Kimmich loves Bayern. He has, I think, 4 kids now. He just had a kid, and he built a house in Munich. He was the kind of guy who you could see, after Muller and Neuer retire, becoming the next captain of Bayern Munich. He's done it all for them. He's truly a leader. And honestly, I think he's been a little bit disrespected by the club. The club clearly, at times, hasn't really wanted him to play midfield, and he's very good at right back, so I can see that point of view too. But he's, I guess, seemingly right now rejected PSG's offers for him. But really every club under the sun has interest in getting him. Most likely next summer it would be on a free. Man City, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Arsenal, Liverpool, like every club has been linked to him at some point. So
he's too old for Chelsea.
Pretty much. He's at that point where he's like going to sign his last big contract after this year. So if Bayern isn't willing to pay for it, he'll likely go somewhere else. But I hope he stays. And then anyways, moving on to the defense now. We only got a couple more names, but, it's just crazy to me how many of these guys Bayern's trying to sell. We'll see what ends up happening. Alphonso Davies, once again, his situation is the same. He'll likely stay at Bayern this year and then leave on a free to Real Madrid next year, which sucks for Bayern. I don't know. I would have maybe tried to sell him just because I think the chances that he actually stays are very low. But we'll see. I guess we'll see how the season goes. And then finally, we have 2 defensive players who are seemingly on the verge. I feel like I've been saying this for months, to Manchester United. Pending, a couple other moves, this is what will cause a domino, I guess, reaction. But you got Matthijs de Ligt, who Bayern's trying to sell, and Manchester United now needs a center back because they're dealing with some injuries, and Bayern doesn't want de Ligt, which is crazy to me. I might do a deep dive on that at some point because that really grinds my gears. But it's likely that de Ligt and Mazraoui are both going to go to United now. Mazraoui, great player, I think, just from the standpoint of a utility player, can play both left and right back, really add some depth to the team, but Bayern just has too deep of a team right now, and they're just trying to shed some players, so he's a guy that if you don't have a lot of injuries, you can maybe afford to lose.
Yeah, I'm certainly hoping De Ligt does not end up at United. I love seeing United have terrible center backs, terrible defense. Their goalie, who I think is trash, Onana, is already talking about how he wants to take more risks this season. Already takes crazy risks and is terrible as a keeper. So if they get De Ligt, he might actually make them become a better team. So hopefully he stays at Bayern.
We'll see. But the likely scenario is he goes to United and then Jonathan Tah comes over to Bayern from Leverkusen, which I don't think he's better than any of our current center backs. No disrespect to Tah. I think he's a fine player. Just makes some mistakes, kind of similar to Upamecano. I just don't think you need him, especially when we're all of a sudden talking about how we need to save money now. But yeah, I guess that really wraps up transfers for Bayern Munich. We missed out on a couple of guys. Xavi Simons is staying with Leipzig. We kind of talked about him last time. That's a bummer. He's a good player, but man, we have a lot of attackers, so it ain't the end of the world. And we're probably going to offer Florian Wirtz the keys and the castle and whatever he wants next summer anyways. And then Dani Olmo signed with Barcelona. I believe it's official now. I think we got a here we go. But he's in Barcelona at least, ready to play for my man Hansi Flick. And there is a high likelihood that Bayern is going to get Desiree Doué, the young French attacker. It's really between them and PSG right now, and the latest reports I saw are that he's leaning towards Bayern. So they're going to add another young, talented attacker to that mix. And honestly, Kompany's going to have his hands full. I guess it's a good problem to have, but we're going to see how he handles all those personalities. And I'm looking forward, really, to the season and just watching the attack and how it's all going to play out.
Yeah, a guy like Kompany, will he lean into the fact that he's young and can relate to some of these guys? He was playing at a high level not long ago at all, so that'll be interesting to watch. Some of these moves might get into the season a little bit with that end of the summer transfer window, but we'll see. Personally, I didn't think Olmo would have been needed at Bayern. I think he's a bit overrated, probably at his price, but we'll see what happens. I mean, Bayern could still add a few guys here and make a run with some talented players.
Yeah, we will certainly see. Reports are that Kompany wants to rotate more than his predecessors did, which at this point, you have to with the amount of players that you have, and maybe it'll keep some guys fresh. So, yeah, exciting to see. What do we got for Chelsea?
It's not much different than the last time I think we talked about a lot of these moves. Yeah. I know last time I had so many notes, and I pretty much went through the gauntlet of all the potential guys that might leave. I'll start there with guys that might leave or have left. We recently got a here we go from my main man Fabrizio for Conor Gallagher. I'm really not sad at this point just because logjam in midfield doesn't necessarily fit Enzo's system. Maybe he didn't want to sign a short contract. Is it a tactic by Chelsea? I don't know. I don't care. He's gone at a decent price, and he's not going to a rival, which for me was huge. I did not want to see him go to Aston Villa or Tottenham, and now he's going to Atletico Madrid. So I'm happy for him. I hope he enjoys Spain. Beautiful country from what I've seen and heard. So that'll be interesting to see how he does over there. But besides him, you got the Chalobahs that are kind of also being banished from the first team and will eventually go out. The Armando Broyas of the world that will most likely go out, whether on loan or hopefully permanent. Same with a guy like David Datro Fofana. But these things will all kind of get dealt with through the next few weeks before the season and even a couple weeks into the season. More young players will start to go out on loan. You already saw Andre Santos go on loan to Strasbourg, but some of these other guys will go out on loan. Gilchrist just went on loan to Sheffield United. So that's something to watch. A lot of the times that stuff happens right at the end of the window. In terms of guys that Chelsea has brought in, we've already talked about Tosin coming over, Guiu coming over, Caleb Wiley, who's going to go out on loan, Renato Vega, I wouldn't be shocked to see him go out on loan. Omari Kellerman, again, Lone guy, academy guy, we'll see. Officially did bring in Philip Jorgensen. I think we maybe talked about him briefly before I left for San Fran.
I think so.
Keeper. Hoping he maybe takes the job over from Sanchez, although in saying that, that means that Sanchez would have to lose the job. So I almost am hoping that Sanchez keeps the job.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tough scenario, but I don't know. Neither of them excite me too much. We'll see what happens there. Dewsbury Hall, who we've talked about, he's gotten some action in the preseason. And we just got a here we go, one of the dominoes that fell because of the Gallagher domino falling. And that domino fell most likely because of the Julian Alvarez domino falling for Atletico Madrid. We get a here we go for Samu. Last name starts with an O. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but technically from Atletico Madrid, never played a match for him. They had him on loan last year at like Elvis or something. Alves. They're in La Liga, but they finished 10th, I want to say. So he was on loan from Atletico. Interesting move. Another young guy, 20 years old, striker. Big guy. Profile of a Premier League striker. You know, your Holland-type profile where you're big, athletic, fast. Raw right now, I think. Will certainly start behind Nico Jackson. Is that the type of move that I wanted? I don't know. I go back and forth between trusting this ownership and not trusting them. We'll see. They could be just so good in 5 years because all these guys are young and grow together. We'll see. They bring him in, and we'll see. Chelsea's still rumored with some other guys. Always rumors with Victor Osimhen. You know, they still got to get Lukaku out the door. You know, that always takes way too long. Hopefully Napoli take him, but they need to get rid of Osimhen, so that's something to watch. There's going to be a lot happening in the last few weeks, which is always unfortunate.
I mean, that's the thing with all these transfers. It's seriously like a game of dominoes, as we've said a couple times. You know, Bayern, Leverkusen, United, one move happens and then it sets off a chain reaction, and 4 more moves happen within the next day, you know. So I'm certainly going to be on the edge of my seat, and at this point, I'm just going to be trusting company and trusting Bayern Munich. And then as the season starts and we start to see how things shape up, maybe I'll speak out a little bit more.
And let's not forget, just last season, a top 5, top 3, top 1, some would argue, player in the world made a move in the final hours of the transfer window. I'm, of course, talking about cold Cole Palmer.
I thought you were talking about Kane.
Was Kane on like a final day?
Yeah, he was towards the end, and there was a lot of back and forth too, to know if it was actually going to happen or not. Most people, from what I know, thought it wasn't going to happen.
That certainly is crazy. I mean, that was such a huge deal. The crazy thing with Palmer is that it came out of nowhere, and that's part of my point I'm making here too, is these moves can happen from thin air.
All right, well, I guess we better wrap things up here. Is there any parting words you have to say about the transfers for Chelsea, or the future, what the future might hold?
No, just excited. I really miss Premier League football. It's going to be so exciting to see action ramp up here. Chelsea won last friendly against Inter Milan at the Bridge, so hopefully they have some momentum going into week 1.
Awesome. Well, I will send us out with a Mia San Mia.
Up the Chelsea.